My name is Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and today we're joined by our special guest, Reverend Heewon Chang, and very excited to be here. We're going to speak about racism. Before we do so, though, I'd like to acknowledge country and where we're all seated here today and gathered, the Gadgul and Mongol country, and that we will all tread lightly on sacred land. So yeah, let's take a moment to ground ourselves here. Hello, welcome. All right. Well, Reverend, I was wondering if you could
Please
introduce
call me
yourself.
Heewon.
Yeah. I feel like I should call you Big Sis.
Oh yeah,
How do you say it in Korean?
Yeah, go ahead. You can call me Onni.
Onni, yeah.
But hello, my name is Heewon. I live, work, and play on the Biddigul and Gadigal country. I'm very humbled to be here to share and also learn from your questions as well. I am one of the ministers at Hope Uniting Church alongside Phil Newton. I am a mother of another Anna that's running around with the other Anna. So thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Oh, and also I should probably have mentioned, but I think most of you will know where the bathrooms are. I've forgotten to say that the bathrooms are around the corner to Martin Hall, but if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to ask any of the folks around. But yeah, thank you. We have a lot of questions about racism, but I think today what we'll do is I have a few questions that you're aware of already, and then the majority of it will be questions from the floor. So any questions that come to mind or bubbling up, please take note of them, and feel free to yell them out later. But we might start with your origin stories, faith story, or both. Tell us more about you.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I have received beforehand was, how did Christianity come into my faith? So just to be very clear, on this unceded land, Christianity arrived with colonialism, so that we all know. The stories are a little bit different in Korea, and I think the stories are a little bit different in other parts of country. But for me as a Korean, so for many Koreans, colonialism did not arrive with Christianity. Colonizers in the Korean context very much looked like us because it was the Japanese that was occupying Korea. And Christianity came in as a bit of a liberative thing. So that's a bit of a difference that we need to hold on to. That when we talk about Christianity and colonialism, it's not black and white. It's a bit complex, I think. So just going to my faith story. So on my dad's side, I think we go up 4 generations. On my mom's side, I think it's 5 generations we go up, where my ancestors accepted faith, and it wasn't like a convert to this thing kind of a thing, but it was more of them. My great-grandfather, he traveled the mountains for 3 days because someone told him that there is this thing called good news. There's this person called Jesus Christ. Go and check it out. And him and his mates went, and they had to travel for 3 days. And they went, and they heard the story, and they were compelled by the gospel that they got baptized. They came back to their villages, and they began worship. They began the church. So that's the kinds of, that's how Christianity came into my family. I think on my mom's side, it goes back like 5th generations. And my great-great-great-great-grandmother So it kind of comes down the matriarch of the family, and there was something in the gospel that compelled her to believe, and it held her, and it kind of came down the family line. So there are many ministers in my family. There are many theologians in my family, but that's the kind of faith that I was brought up with.
Yeah, wow, that sounds incredible. Like a 3-day pilgrimage, essentially, for your ancestors, yeah. And it sounds like faith also in Christianity was a huge part of your family lineage. And was that the case for you as well growing up?
I think so. I grew up in the church, so when I look at Anna, I think, yeah, so I very much grew up. Yeah, I very much grew up in the Christian, in the church, in the community aspect of life. Yeah.
Yeah. And you touched on colonialism a little bit, and the context in Korea. We're currently doing a series about unlearning empire, and it's all about unpacking colonialism in the Bible. What are your thoughts on the impact, I guess, or the dynamics between colonialism and Christianity?
It's complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we would like to think of it as black and white, but it's actually not really black and white. I think it's more. So it's not that Christianity is colonialism. If we say Christianity is colonialism, I don't think that works, because I don't think that's true. Gospel is not colonialism. Christianity was never owned by one group of people. The gospel was not owned by one empire. So we need to make that very clear. I think it's more of how the churches, specific churches in different time, in different contexts, where they used Christianity and they used the biblical text to further their agenda. So I think that's how we should see it. Yeah, I'm just thinking of the Korean context, because see, that's the thing in Korea. Before the missionaries arrived, we already had translated Korean Bibles. There were already Christians. There were already churches before the arrival of the colonizers. And Japan was trying to colonize us. So before the missionaries came, there were actually translated Bibles in Korean. There were churches. But then at the same time, Korea has gone through various difficult points of history. We had the Japanese occupation, we had the Korean War, we had the military dictatorship, so we had all that hard struggle, and in some way, the American influence was pretty huge, and that kind of coupled together with Christianity. So you see that aspect in the Korean churches now. But there is always a side of resistance within Korean churches as well. I think I'm just babbling now. But yeah, so and I think that's true of our biblical text. There's all those horrifying texts that I think your minister is happily unpacking with you and challenging you guys with. But then at the same time, there are some really beautiful gospel in there. So I guess the point for us as Christians is, how do we hold them together? Because I don't think we should. I think some people say, oh, let's just get rid of, let's just get rid of this. But I don't think that's going to be very helpful, because if we really truly sit with those uncomfortable texts, it kind of teaches about us. We are living in a world where war is still declared in God's name, and we see that in our biblical text as well. But then we also see there's this other voice constantly in the Bible that pushes back against that. So we need to hold that faithfully together, I think. I think I've babbled too much, yeah.
No, I think that's exactly the lines that we were exploring together. It's very interesting to unpack, particularly, I guess, the violence of it all, and also holding it all very lightly. Do you have ways that you have unpacked difficult texts and dealt with those kind of, I guess, clashes?
Like the text of terror.
Yeah.
So this morning at Hope, I preached on Deuteronomy 24, which is a beautiful text where it talks about how we should take care of the foreigners, the aliens, the orphans and the widows, that, don't glean too much, leave stuff on the trees. So it's one of the very prominent teachings in Deuteronomy. But I think we all know that in the same biblical book, there is the text about go and kill all the local inhabitants, utterly destroy them, show no mercy. So it comes from same book. So the same book says that you should go and kill all the local inhabitants, but then also care for the foreigners and care for the vulnerable. So I guess as Christians, we really need to wrestle and hold them together and search and see how this text plays out in our world and how it has played out in their world, and then it kind of teaches us which path that we should follow.
Yeah. That's really applicable as well, I guess, for what churches and Christians could be doing today when we're unpacking our faith. Do you have other, I guess, tips or advice or things that you think the church should be doing on racism or big and heavy topics like
Big and heavy topics.
Yes.
So when I think about the Uniting Church, we have statements. We have so many statements.
Yeah. We love a statement.
I think maybe we might have too many statements. We hugely celebrate cultural diversity. I think on the websites, on the Uniting Church or on the Synod website, it says that, on every Sunday, we worship in 40 different languages, blah, blah, blah. So Uniting Church has a great emphasis on cultural diversity, which I think is a good thing, yeah? Cultural diversity is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But the thing about just only concentrating on cultural diversity is you don't name racism, you don't name any of that. So in a way, it celebrates all this wonderful cultural diversity, but we don't really get to the grain of it, I guess. Because the thing about racism is, I think you have all heard that it's a social construct. So racism is this thing where some people were believed that they are more pure and they are more superior, and some people were believed that they are not worthy and blah, blah, blah. And in the midst of it, it's about hierarchy, it's about power, it's ultimately about who is holding the power. So if we use that lens to look at our wonderful, wonderful Uniting Church, I mean, let's just imagine that tomorrow, for some whatever reason, all the non-white leaders, including myself, Radhika, everyone, all the Pacifica churches, all the Korean churches, let's just say that they decided to leave Uniting Church. For whatever reason, tomorrow they just decide that they're going to leave Uniting Church. So besides missing them, besides being a bit sad that they have left, has our structures, theology, has it are they going to change, or or is the church still going to go on as usual? So, so I think that's the heart of when we talk about anti-racism. See, uniting church, wonderful, beautiful. It's all of our church, but we did inherit a colonial way, I think, of being the church that wasn't really like seriously reckoned with. So we know our history from when the uniting church, these three denominations came together, and we all know how struggle it was for them to come together. I love the basis of union. I love the preamble. So it's this beautiful church. But then at the same time, we don't really know the history of these churches that we come from. So there's some kind of a vague, not silence, but I guess blindness. So blindness in that, like, you know, how was the Methodist church long time ago that came? Like, what was their ministry? Like, you know, in our preamble, we just have one sentence saying that some churches were not so friendly to the First Nations people, and some, you know, acted in good faith. But we don't really know what they did. And in a way, we have, I don't think it was the intention, but we have kind of like washed it away almost. So there's that. So when we talk about like being anti-racist, like being a church on unceded land, and you know, Uniting Church does own a lot of property. Like we are a very property-rich church. So like, what does that mean? Like, how do we untangle ourselves from that? So that's one thing. Another thing for me personally is in the Uniting Church we use the term CALD, so culturally and linguistically diverse, and I really do not like that term.
Me too.
I have serious problems with this term because it's a term that's usually used on people like me or you, Leah. So it's normally used. It's normally used on a premise that white and English is the norm, and against that, you are culturally and linguistically diverse. So there is a bit of a problem with that term, and as a church community, we use that term, but it was a term that was developed by the Australian government, and I think they are slowly getting rid of it as well. So why are we still stuck with that term in the church? So that's my one thing, and I think as a uniting church, because we celebrate so much the cultural diversity, we are a little bit lazy. I think we're a little bit lazy about like talking about racism or anything, because we go with, oh, but you know, cult is something that we've used for so long. You know, what other ways should we say? You know, so we're a little bit lazy, but then we like our statements. So
No, I get you. I've heard the term culturally and racially marginalized, CARM.
yeah, I prefer that more. I think. I mean, there are many more terms. Like there is CARM, culturally and racially marginalized. I think there's BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. So there are other terms, and you know, you can just say Korean, or you can just say Tongan or Sri Lankan instead of. See, that's another thing about race. it's categorizing people into you belong white. I think I was yellow. There was red and black. So it is categorizing, and I think the term cult also categorizes. So let's stop putting people into little boxes.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hearing nods and so on, and I'm hearing nods, hearing agreement across the room. I'm also wondering if there are questions from the floor, if anything you'd like to share more. But now's the chance. Adrian's got the mic, so if anyone has questions for... Okay, there you go.
There's one thing to be different from the majority. I went to visit a camp where Japanese Americans were interned, and I bought a book of people of Japanese extract living in America. And there was a story of a girl who was the daughter of a Japanese war bride and an Anglo military father. And they lived in, of all places, Kansas City, which at that time couldn't have been more white. And this little girl went to school, and she was the only Asian. And she came home one day all excited. "Oh, Mommy, there's somebody at my school that looks like me." And her mother looked at this other child and said, "Don't speak to her, she's Korean." And it's a case of we make our minorities by categorizing them. And I think I agree with you, there's too much emphasis on the diversity and how we're all different, but not enough emphasis on how we're all the same. Do we not all want to be loved, appreciated, accepted, and belong? Do we all want to feel comfortable within who we are and what we are, whether we reflect our cultural background or fight it? I think that's where we've gone wrong. Even I used to have to teach multiculturalism when I was a primary teacher. But I think if we emphasize more about how we're the same, we all need love, and we all need to love each other. That's the only way through. And I am very distressed by the way they say division, but it's really hatred of the other, is being used for political purposes worldwide. In fact, we sort of have a war right now because of it. And I'd like you to comment on what I just said.
Thank you, but I guess the only danger is, we are all same. Let's not focus on too much on our difference. But I think it's actually about loving the difference. So it's not about, because one of the things that people say is, "Oh, I don't see color," like I love everyone. But then when you say you don't see color, I instantly go, then you don't see me as a Korean. So it's a very fine line between that we are okay with the differences and we love the differences, and it's okay. It's okay to hear someone with a different accent. That they are not all going to sound like like you or me, and that's okay. So I think that's the kind of community that we should aim for. I'm just thinking, when we go to synod, presbytery, or assembly, those big meetings, there's so many diverse cultures in that gathered room. There are so many people where English is not their first language, but then the main operating language is English. And you go, yeah, okay, I get it. Okay, you can use English as the main operative language. But but imagine, why can we not create a community that's safe enough, that's honest enough, that's caring enough, so that people who don't speak English as their first language have the courage to stand up and ask the questions in their language, and then it can be translated into English. I have been to synod meetings, assembly meetings, and presbytery meetings, and I have not seen that. And for me, that's something, because when you are expecting people to come and really join, and we always say, oh, we want to hear from you, blah blah blah, but you are not really giving them the right tools or creating the table for them to speak and to be part of. So yeah.
Question, sir? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been vigorously nodding because I've agreed so much with what you've been saying.
I'm
And I'm like,
hearing.
yes. Because I personally feel like Australia hasn't reckoned with racism at all. And so that's why it kind of trickles down into the church. And the current push towards social cohesion being basically assimilation kind of reflects that. But I'm just kind of wondering, because I love what you were just saying about, learning from other people, what is something from the Korean church that you really like that maybe we could bring into the Uniting Church or somehow influence the way we do in the Uniting Church, rather than what I'm assuming is a lot of kind of colonialism, we're going to do things the white Western Christian way. Like, what can we bring into the church that, Korean Christians do?
So, see, that's the beauty of the Korean church. Korean church itself is so diverse. Like, you've got the fundamentals, like you've got the crazy ones, you've got the good ones, you've got the bad, you've got the bad ones. It's beautiful. But in the Korean churches, across their differences, there is a very strong emphasis on prayer. So Koreans tend to be a praying people, so there's that. This isn't really answering your question, but I think the Korean churches within the Uniting Church tend to be a bit more conservative, and like a lot of migrant churches, they tend to be more conservative. But then there are lots of actually like really liberal, queer affirming churches back in Korea. But then I don't see any Uniting churches doing solidarity stuff with them. So that's one way. So I guess that's the thing. Like, so Korean churches are very diverse, and there are people and there are groups that you can actually, that the Uniting Church can actually be in solidarity with. So, didn't really answer your question, but
Lovely. More questions from the floor? That's it. Paige?
Hi, thanks so much for chatting so openly with us. I was just wanted to make a reflection and put a question in there somewhere, I guess, that recently I've been to a few things in the Uniting Church or Uniting Church adjacent where it's sort of like posed as a First Nations and Pacifica space, but then there's actually no relationships that we have with our First Nations people in the room. It's often focused a lot on Pacifica people and Pacifica migrants to Australia, which in and of itself I think is an amazing thing. I think that having Tonga Parish and Fiji Parish and things like that so close to us is a blessing. But to me, it feels like the Uniting Church has kind of almost excused itself from reckoning with colonisation on these lands by being so, I guess, like, involved with, like, Pacifica things that sometimes I think I go to these events, and the other day there was a woman at one of the events who was First Nations, and she said, why am I here? Like, there's nothing for me here. This is not about me. This is a brand that you've slapped on this. And I think I see that a lot in the Uniting Church. Like, we just think, oh, well, we do this well, so therefore we're not racist towards Indigenous people. And I think that, like, obviously racism comes from a lot of places, but before anything, we have to reckon with our First Nations people and the way that we treat them. Have you seen that done well anywhere in the Uniting Church? And if you have seen it done well, what elements made it good, do you think?
I'm just trying to think. So Uniting Church, we have a special covenant. We have the covenant with the UAICC. We don't really see that in our synod. It's UAICC, I think, within this synod is weak, I think. But I think they are slowly forming and getting there. But when I went to the assembly, there was the presence of the UAICC. They had their tables. When there was a particular discussion, they would go out because they would decide it, or they would talk about it amongst themselves. Throughout the meeting, there would be the First Nations voice continually, especially when we were talking about mission. It was the First Nation leaders who said we have a problem with that word mission, because mission in this country was used in a very brutal way. And if we didn't have that voice, we would have gone along instead, or let's be a missional church, blah, blah, blah. But we had that voice continually telling us. So in the assembly there, yeah. Yeah, I haven't really answered your question, but I mean, I guess it's also up to us to build relationships with the First Peoples. And I'm not just saying within the Uniting Church, but you guys are located here. Like, who are your First Peoples, and how are you building relationships with the people here? I think it is more important, because the inputs that we get from them is very valuable, and that takes a very long time to build. Because if you're a church community, you're not going to be very welcomed, are you? And you should be okay with that, but it's the continuously learning about the First Peoples here. I think it's the Wongal peoples, and slowly building relationships that way. And yeah, maybe one day we will get there.
Do you mind telling us what UICC stands for?
The Uniting Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Christian Congress.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like that top down, up, and bottom
So
up
it's the all the gathering of the First Nations people, and do you guys know how the covenant came into being?
Some of us might, some of us not.
Some of us don't. So Australia had their centenary celebration, and the assembly, the previous assembly, decided that the church will not celebrate because it was offending to our First Nations peoples. But then some congregations wanted to celebrate, so they decided to celebrate, and the UAICC said, that's not cool, that's not cool. So that's how the covenant came to be about, because the mainstream churches couldn't keep their promise. So that's how, and that's why we have the covenant. But see, that's the thing with the covenant. How many of our local congregations or synods or presbyteries are really investing on the promise that we had? You know, how are we really investing in First Nations theology? We have the United Theological College, which is the college that I studied and did my theology. It's wonderful. Lecturers there are wonderful. But how are we intentionally having space for First Nations theology, theologians, not as someone just doing a, you know, guest lecture here and there, but as a permanent lecturer? You know, those things I think are the practices that the church can do, because I firmly believe that they will help us be liberated. So without the liberation of the first peoples, there will be continuing racism, I think. So
Thank you for explaining that. Another question.
Thanks, Heewon. What responsibility do you think lies with you and me and other BIPOC or CALM people in naming racism, dismantling racism and promoting anti-racism in the church? And what responsibility lies with white people for that same task? What is our responsibility and what is not our responsibility?
I don't think it's our responsibility. I think racism is white people's problem. Sorry to say it so bluntly, but it's your problem, and we have to cop it. Like, we are the ones at the end getting all the racist abuse. So as a church, don't expect me to talk about racism all the time. Don't expect Rads to talk about racism all the time. But white folks, it's up to you, the church. It's up to the church to be serious about anti-racism.
Yeah, and it's tough. There's a burden that comes with carrying it as well. It's like we don't speak for everybody.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it kind of becomes it becomes individualized. So instead of really dismantling the structure or really seriously thinking about how power is shared and all that, looking at that imbalance and figuring that out, it kind of becomes, oh, I'm sorry you experienced racism. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Raz, that you experienced racism. Heewon, I'm sorry you experienced racism. So it kind of becomes this individualistic thing, which doesn't really help us change the structure. So, yeah.
I have a question about that actually, about like explaining even what is racism. Maybe we should have started there. Because I totally agree with you about that whole individualized experience of racism. It's almost can be experienced as, oh, I've experienced bullying. And that can be understood quite easily. But the structural element of it, the systemic part, how do you explain that and unpack that to someone who might be white or not, even, just to explain, like, well, actually what you experience is racism, or this is what racism is.
Like a structural racism. I mean, let's look at the pulpit, for example. So most of the pulpits look like that, which means it normally meant for, it's definitely not for me people, because, I'm there. So it's normally for a taller people, it's for an abled body, because you need to go up the steps. And you know, that was what the ministers were. They were tall, white, male, able-bodied people. So it's kind of normalizing. So that pulpit kind of represents the normalization. So when we talk about structure, I think we need to think about like what are we taking for normal? Like what are we taking for granted? And I think slowly we can unpack from that. Does that make sense for people? Yeah.
From that, I'm thinking as well, I've been talking to Deepa, who's not here today, but about this. It's so hard to see because it's the water we swim in, even when you really want to see it. But that a way of working with that is to also turn the lens and study whiteness explicitly, right? So as well as, can we hear from First Nations people? Can we learn First Nations ways, etc.? Absolutely. But if we never go, what is whiteness? And not just in terms of skin, but what's Western thought, Enlightenment thought, you know, a real narrow kind of intellectual way of doing things, for instance, as ways of knowing, being and doing. We can't see what's the kind of thing you just pointed out. So at the very least, as a short course, but I don't know how it looks at bigger levels in Synod or whatever hell that happens.
So do you have a question?
I think it was more of a comment.
Yeah, so true. Thank you.
I wonder what it's like for you coming from a country where lineage is very, very important, and people are able to trace the purity of their bloodlines back many generations. And Korea, like everyone else, is changing. What is it like for you to come from that culture where that is embedded in every heart and soul, that this is a key thing about being Korean, and then to come to a multicultural society like Australia? Was that complex for you to rethink some of those areas?
Well, I think that's just one aspect of being a Korean. I think there are diverse ways of being Korean. My daughter is fully Korean, fully Australian. My husband's pretty white. Her Korean isn't as fluent as mine, but to me, she's still Korean. There are lots of Korean adoptees, because that's one of the things that the Korean government did. Are they Korean or are they not Korean? I think they are Korean. So I think being Korean, there are multiple ways of being a Korean, like there are multiple ways of being an Australian. So I don't know if that answered your question.
I lived in Korea for a number of years, and it was an extraordinary experience. But when I went there the first time, 97% was the level of where people could trace the purity of their bloodline. And then the last year I was there, it was 79%. And that's a massive shift in that time. And, you know, there's all sorts of reasons for that. But
I think that was one of the myths. I think that was one of the myths of Korea, that we all came from the same bloodline, or that Korea is very homogeneous. I think that was one of the myths that Koreans liked to believe. But scientifically, it's been proven that we are actually a mixture of everything. So I think in each culture, there is some kind of a myth. I think in Australia, it's the myth of Telenolius. So I think in each culture, there is a little bit of that myth. But having said that, for a very long time, in our like coloring pencils and stuff, there was one specific color that said skin color. And it was the color that was a little bit palish, peachy, orangey type of color. And for a very long time, till year 2000, so that's how crazy it is, Koreans just assumed that that's the skin color, because that's the color of our people's skin. And during that time, we had a lot of foreign workers in Korea, and they lodged a complaint to the human rights saying, you cannot say it's the skin color. And since then, we've changed it and we've renamed that.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
yeah.
Just one.
In Korea, is there a caste system?
Not a caste system. Like any other culture, there's more of a class. So there are someone who's super rich, some living under the poverty line, and someone in between. Long time ago, there was the ruling class when we used to have like kings and queens, but yeah, that was ancient Korea. But then when you look through the Korean history, there was always some kind of an uprising.
Thanks, Heewon. I'd just like to respond to this. I'm interested in the fact that you talk about complexity, because I'm clearly white, aren't I? But when I was 9, I came to Australia, and it was the first time that I realised I was different. Now, it wasn't my skin colour that was different, it was how I spoke that was different. And I would get laughed at because of certain words that I said that were very Scottish, but and as a 9-year-old, it impacted me quite strongly. In fact, there are words that even today I will not say because I was laughed at. I married an Italian-born person, and in our Italian Scottish connection, both ways, there was probably been what might be classified as racism, in that the Italians think that they are the best and only people, and the Scots, well, so, and I know in Paula's family, they, as Italians experience, I don't think you really felt the experience, but experienced some sort of racism as they were growing up, but they would be classified as white. In some of my roles in the church, have been in non-Anglo situations where I have experienced something of being the other, being not listened to because I'm not of that particular culture or race. Carl, I don't know that I use that very much. It's always trying to think what term that you use for lots of these things. But so I'm just wondering your responses to that. I mean, to me, as you said earlier on, there's complexity about things, and it's not all just one thing, black or white.
I think that's the thing with race, yeah? So you have your culture, you have your own language. I mean, and then we kind of modeled you into white. They kind of modeled all the Asians into one category. So it doesn't serve you and it doesn't serve us. So it doesn't really serve any one of us. And I think that's the thing with racism, that it really, we can talk about white privilege, but then at the same time, I think it's a white lie, isn't it? That you've been lied to and you've been meddled into this one category. So it's a system that doesn't benefit any one of us.
Ooh, a few questions.
You've kind of alluded to this, and Rad's actually talked about it in her promotion for the current preaching series, but just wondering about microaggressions that maybe you've experienced in the Uniting Church and some things that people can watch out for.
Microaggressions? Can you unpack?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? So what do you mean by micro?
Oh, so microaggressions being like those little things that people don't necessarily think are racist, but, you know, are serving those racist power structures. Like if somebody was to say something like, somebody said to Rads, oh, you know, aren't you glad that Anna is, you know, light like her father? Like stuff like that, like really little things that people don't think about, but that are harmful.
I think everyone makes remarks about the Pacifico culture in their time. Can we not get over it? I mean, can we not come to an agreement that people and culture understand time differently? But we always kind of make it. I mean, you know, they just do it in a very like a passing away manner. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Heewon, for sharing. Just been thinking a little bit about your comment in terms of responding to like racism, and that's something for white people to deal with, which I'm like, yes, you can't put that at the feet of like people who experience it. At the same time, like there's a book written by Kevin Gilbert, Aboriginal activist, called "Because a White Man Will Never Do It." Just this sense that like white people are so blind, and not just blind, but are benefiting so much from the setup. Like I think of my family, like think about, you know, this talking about property, how much can we sell this for? It's like, you know, there's this benefit privilege that's happening because of the way things now operate in this country. Like that, like a lot of white people aren't gonna engage, like ain't gonna care. Or you can go the other extreme where, they'll like this other kind of white mindset to want to be like this crusader and, you know, fix the problem and just, like be, you know, this amazing like kind of, crusade in terms of fixing things. So I guess, like, I don't know, just some things I've been thinking about. I don't know if you have any further thoughts about that kind of nuance.
I don't know, as I was just listening to you, like race is complex. It's muddled together with gender, with class, with your ability, you know, with language. So I think that's why it makes it complex. So it's a combination. It's a combination of that.
It's interesting because I think what I'm hearing is like how do we deal with white saviorism in a way?
But is it really benefiting you? Like, I mean, for how long will it benefit you?
How do we make white people care?
Well, like even with the white savior thing, because I'm thinking of all the developmental stuff, you know, like all the agencies going to Africa and stuff, but just fix the problems that you've already got.
I think when I came here 50 years ago, and I'm white, I've probably got more English blood in me than the king. I know my ancestry and my DNA. But what I found coming to Australia is that I had to deal with every negative stereotype of Americans. And that's just plain ignorance. And I think a lot of racism is just plain ignorance, that people are reacting to their limited knowledge and understanding and then categorizing that on a person of a different race. Now, when I went back to the States and I chose to teach in a multiracial school district, I had a black boss, and we came from two sides of Pasadena, California. He came from Altadena, where a lot of black people live, I didn't tell him I came from San Marino, which was an exclusive white community. But I chose to work in that neighborhood. I didn't set out to work in a white school district. I chose to work in a multiracial school district. And I always told him I was from Pasadena. But the minute I confessed I actually grew up in San Marino, he did everything he could to make me look stupid in staff meetings. He had to put me down. And that was really based on his ignorance of where I was coming from. And I think we do that to each other regardless as to what our race is. We assume a lot of things about other people that aren't true. But we white people are so arrogant, we don't ask. We don't ask those questions. And maybe white people should be asking for more information from people of other races. What do you think about that?
You know, we talk about having safe space, yeah? We talk a lot about making sure that the space is safe. And I think that's really important. But maybe as a church community, we can also have honest spaces where we can actually have honest questions. And I think a space like this is like that, where you are not condemning or judging, but actually having a really honest conversation, having those honest spaces would be a good thing. It will be hard, but it will be a good thing.
Probably lots of folks also afraid to ask.
Hi. Just a couple of comments. The first one is hopefully something that's a positive and a sign of things to come, but our grandson, who's in year 3 at school, goes to a school at Parramatta, and the school is predominantly dark-skinned, mainly Indian backgrounds, in kindergarten, and he is very white as blonde hair and very fair skin. He was the only white child in the class and quite a bit taller. His observation, and he had, you know, he loved his friends in kindergarten, and he still loves his friends, but his observation to his parents of what was different, he said to them once, well, I forget the name of the little boy, but he must be younger than me because he's so much shorter than me. Didn't stop him playing with it, but that was his observation of the difference. Nothing to do with skin. And as I say, hopefully that's a sign of things to come. My other comment is really, as Neil said, I was born in Italy, and I didn't experience any racism at school because I didn't look Italian. I was white, but I didn't look Italian. So I had no problems. Interestingly, when we started having more Asian immigrants coming to Australia, my parents were racist. So they became part of that racism, and we shouldn't have so many Asians here, etc., blah, blah. But it just made me also wonder, is there any sense of that amongst Koreans with other nationalities that come here? I don't know.
I mean, like, I don't know about like Korean specific, but like when you look at One Nation, it's not all white. I mean, there are some people who look like me, who are a little bit darker than me, who joined One Nation. When there was the whole March of Australia, was it March of Australia? There were some Indians there as well. So, yeah. Yeah, Paula. Yeah. So it is very, very interesting. Yeah. But I guess maybe it's got to do with survival as well, because you don't want to be the othered one. So you're going to join the ones who look like they've got the power, and maybe if I join you guys, I won't be othered, because I have seen what racism is in this country, and I don't want to be on the target of that. So I think there is a bit of underlining wanting to survive and a bit of fear in that as well.
Can I ask, do you see that the structure of racism has changed? Because I'm Chinese, and given the status of China becoming a superpower, it seems like the structure of racism has becoming from when I was a kid, that to bully that Asian kid, to now that, oh my goodness, this powerful Asian country is going to swamp us. And I know there is a lot of politics involving, this fear of, this Chinese invasion, or this, Chinese warship is going to be out in our coastal waters and, gun us down or something. Do you see like there is this kind of change in structure in racism from being, bullying a certain race to maybe, like in my case, to fearing a growing power in Australia? And, as a Chinese person, or maybe as, I don't know, like a Chinese person, what should I do to sort of, is there anything I can do to sort of not add fire into that fear?
Because racism is about it's the constant othering, isn't it? First it was targeted, I don't know, to the First Nations people, then to the Muslims, and now Chinese. It's a constant othering of people. The target might be different, but it's the constant othering. And sorry, so your question was how to. To defeat racism? Or to fight, to fix all the racist problems? Not to inflame. Okay. Do you feel like you are inflaming? Yeah? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the question. Is it because China at the moment is being seen as the superpower?
Like there are times where maybe I haven't experienced it, but my friends have experienced certainly a few white people who will aggravate them and say, "Oh, you Chinese, go back to where you come from." My friend, like, well, we're powerful now. If you say that again, we've got to bomb you. That kind of thing. Yeah. It's
okay.
like there seems to be this. There's some growing vicious cycle, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. I think I get your question. Well, you need to learn that you need to be in solidarity with the First Nations people. So it shouldn't be that I'm going to bomb you because I've got a big country behind you. But I guess as a migrant, as any one of us, whether we were born here, came here, whatever means how we came here, our responsibility or our posture should be to be in solidarity with the First Nations peoples, because that racism that's directed to you, and there's been an increase since COVID, there's been a definite increase of racism against people who look like me. But then the amount of racism that's directed to the First Nations people since Australia formed is crazy. So I think we need to find ways where we could be in solidarity with each other, but also with our First Nations peoples.
So, hello. So I am a second generation Filipino, and I grew up in a local Filipino church in Manjot. It's actually a church where both of my parents met, and like a point of contact where when they first arrived in Australia, they got to be around other Filipinos like them. That being said, the church that I grew up with, as much as there are a lot of there's obviously like an element of Filipino identity around it. At the same time, it is also very socially conservative. They don't really contend with like imperialism or even in Filipino politics. And I feel like they, in a sense, like the church that I grew up in, don't really contend with like racism or the broader issues of what it means to be a Filipino. And I'm sharing this anecdote because I am aware that this is not like an isolated case like in Filipino churches. I think a lot of East Asian churches are socially conservative. And I believe there was a speaker from one of the Sunday sessions that has said that a lot of Pacifica churches have had this issue as well, where they're currently dealing with aging, and a lot of like young queer people are leaving the church because it may have accommodated to their parents' needs, but it definitely did not accommodate who they are. That being said, I think one of the challenges when I think about like talking about anti-racism in the church is contending with the fact that like there is an importance with cultural churches, of course, in like affirming like spaces of like your ethnicity, especially migrating to Australia, but you're also dealing with I would say socially conservative elements that you have to contend with. So just wanted to ask how do you wrestle with that, and how can we wrestle with those elements when talking about, acknowledging the spaces of, churches that, can be conservative.
Well, you are wrestling with it, so that's a good sign, isn't it? And I'm sure there will be many more second, third gen that will come out from that spaces and go, okay, a little bit different. Okay, maybe we need to do things a little bit differently. So I think it does take time. A lot of the migrant churches tend to be more conservative because it's about preserving their cultural identity, their language, and all that. So there's a beauty in that they are trying to preserve something and they are trying to hold on to something. But then back home, like, they've moved on. So what's an issue here? It's not really an issue anymore. And I think slowly, the churches will change because they've got the second gen, the third gen, the fourth gen that grow up here, and you need to find a different way of doing church, doing theology, and doing all that. So be patient, my brother, but like talk to other groups as well, because the questions that you have, the things that you are wrestling with, it's not just for a Filipino. I think if you talk to a second gen Korean, They might have a similar thing, Pacifica second gen. Normally there's something similar, and just create those spaces.
I just want to thanks Heewon so much for coming here today and your time and your honesty and your patience with us for these questions. So yeah, really appreciate that. I think it's really, like you said, it's a unique space to ask these questions. One thing I worry a lot about, and when you're talking about, we know race is a social construct and really it was created to maintain and control power and control people. And you talked about assumptions that are baked into the church, things like the pulpit and, you know, the assumptions that are made, or norms that are built around, or what's assumed to be a norm. I would like to hear from you about representations of Jesus and God, because I know we can see behind us a Jesus who looks fairly white. And I know historically that's been very much created by the church in context of, say, for example, in slavery, in that idea that God is white, and so it's about modelling Jesus and God in our own image, in that sense, as a white person. How much do you think that is something that's important for the church to grapple with and tackle? Like, what does it say about the church that we need to represent Jesus as white when historically that it's not accurate?
I mean, I'm really hoping that we've moved on from the white Jesus, but you've got that. But then at the back, there's also the baptism of Jesus, and that's very brown to me. So maybe like having those diverse images is helpful. I mean, we talk about white Jesus, but that's a very contextual Jesus, isn't it? And it kind of went everywhere. But and just knowing and naming that that's not the global, or that's not the Jesus, but that's just a very European interpretation of Jesus, which kind of makes sense that, you know, you do contextual stuff and you want Jesus to look like me. The problem is it just was used in such a way that was harming. So I guess as church communities, I think at Hope, and there are lots of images. So I think at Hope a few years ago we did the like nativity, and there are lots of different interpretations of the nativity from different cultures, which kind of opens your eye up a bit. So, you know, doing something like that.
Yeah. While we were in Wine and Jesus, this is a popular topic, is images of Jesus and also how we imagine God. So I find it a very interesting space. In fact, one of the images that we brought to our group was a Jesus in Korean garb. So we're like, oh, a Korean Jesus. We like to, I guess, see Jesus through our own lens. We have another question in the back.
Hi, Heewon. Laura, I'm just wondering what kind of conversations you're having with your daughter about race and racism, and what that looks like and how you navigate that without adding a whole element of, like, worry. But, yeah, how do you have that conversation? I ask as a teacher, but also a parent of a non-white child, that this is a world that, yeah, it feels important to have those conversations, but I'm curious how you do that.
I'm just trying to think whether I had a conversation with Anna in that regard. Like, one of the things that I do with Anna is I don't say you are a half Australian or half Korean. I say you are fully Korean and you are fully Australian, because I don't think you can put people, I don't know. So I teach her to embrace her dad's culture, but then her dad's culture, I mean, he's a migrant, like a third generation migrant. So we kind of point out that, you know, he is Australian, but his background is this. Your mom is Korean, and then this is, you know, this is the culture, and kind of yeah, so we very naturally have those conversations. Having said that, I'm a Korean, so I pushed my Korean to Anna. She's not here. But yeah, so I do that too. So Anna's school is Metroville Public School, and they have the first fleet as the school symbol, and you have like the cross country whatever, and you are divided into the school. What do you call it? Like the houses. It was Philip Cook and one more. So it was basically all male and all first fleet colonizers. So we kind of had that conversation, and then we pointed out, until this moment, she's in year 3, she thought that boat on her school uniform was a pirate ship.
Oh.
So she was always going, "Ahoy, my mateys!" So she thought it was a really cool thing, and she was really devastated that it was the first fleet in those names. So she pushed her dad to go and talk to the PNC and suggest that they change the names, and they think about changing the logo, but at least change, because it's 3 male name, and it was all first people who arrived on First Fleet. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, we are almost at time, and I know that you have something that you'd like to share. Maybe we can close in that way.
Yeah, so sometimes I write poem, and I was just thinking of how I would share today. I wrote a poem, and I thought I would end with this poem, and I would like to share that with you. So it's not too long. So I come from country that remembers occupation. I am a Korean woman who carries resistance in her inheritance, and grief in her history, and God in a language you have not yet learned to hear. Do not think you can manage me into your diversity program. Do not welcome me into a room you are not willing to change. Do not ask me to make my complexity convenient. I am not the color in your brochure, and I am not your multicultural Sunday. I am not proof that your church has saved me. I am proof that God was never only yours. And the country beneath my feet has been holding this truth for 60,000 years. So I begin where I should. Will you join and honor the ones who never left? 이 땅의 주인, whose feet know this ground by memory older than maps, whose stories held the stars before we had names for them. I do not pass through your country, I ground my feet. 존경을 드립니다. My liberation is bound up with yours. 저를 받으세요. I bow to country. Will you join?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.